Welcome to Decode. Today I want to react to the latest video by the artist Rosalia. But really, this is a video about artificial intelligence. And sure, maybe you guys are wondering, what? What does that have to do with each other? You'll see. Bear with me. Today we're going to talk about creativity and how creativity must evolve in the age of AI, using Rosalia as an example. Let's go. As you guys may be very well aware, Rosalia, the Spanish musician, released her new song called Vergain this week with a video, and it was extremely well received across the different media, social media and traditional media. I'll leave you a link here if you haven't seen the video. And it was very well received because it's extremely disruptive, extremely creative. You know, Rosalia in this song, if you have followed Rosalia through the years, she began doing kind of like flamenco, kind of like inspired kind of stuff, and then she moved to Motomami, which was way more urban, and now she's breaking rules again with this new song, which is come from her forthcoming album called Lux, L-U-X. And so Bergain actually is, the best way to describe it is kind of like a symphonic opera kind of thing, with an aria in the middle sung by Rosalia, and then an appearance by Björk, and symbolism to fill a track with. And there's people in social media actually decoding the video, all the symbols and all the metaphors that Rosalia is using to explain the different ideas about being, heartbroken on the video. But the thing is, the video was extremely weird, because in a world dominated by pop and traditional songs that follow, 4-chord structures and stuff like that, here's Rosalia actually doing something that sounds more like from a couple centuries ago, really, and you cannot predict it, you cannot put it in a category because it defines a category on its own. It feels unique, it feels alive. And that is what creativity and disruption feels like. And that's the reason why Rosalia has been so surprising with this new video, because she's actually creative in the strong sense of the word. Of course, all of us, we talk about the creative industry, such as film and TV and music and books. But let's face it, in the last 30 to 40 years, the creative industries, let's say the strong word is industry and the weak word is creative, because once you've seen a couple superhero movies, mostly all of them feel very samey. Once you've heard a couple singers from the last 10 to 20 years, with some exceptions, they all feel very samey. And same thing happens with books. And here comes Rosalia putting an opera and telling us, move all that away. Here's my latest work. And this is what creativity should feel like. And that really is what I want to talk about the relationship between that and the era of AI. Because I think what Rosalia has done is a very good answer to the work being done in AI. There's a lot of controversy about AI only being able to produce derivative works, kind of like remixing existing stuff to create new stuff, But here Rosalia comes with something out of the blue, completely different to everything you've heard in the last 10, 20, 30 years. AI basically does not break rules. It just generates new things from the database of content that it has been fed with. And that's what I want to start this video with. Again, I'm a technologist myself. I'm a creative technologist, so I know how AI works and I know how creativity works. So if you think about any AI system, from Midjourney to ChatGPT to Gemini or any of the systems, at the end of the day, in very layman terms, they have a database of content that they have analyzed and studied, and they're able to create new content based on the content that they have been trained with. An LLM, a large language model, has billions of words of text and books and web pages and whatnot, and with that they generate a corpus of knowledge that they can then use to generate new text. And for example, something like Midjourney, which is an image generation AI, has again billions of images that they have been able to scrape from the internet and from paintings and from photos and yada yada yada, and with that they're able to generate new photos by remixing content. And then that is, to me, the starting point where things get interesting with Rosalia, because of course she is also remixing culture. Of course she is. When I hear Rosalia, now I'm hearing Wagner, now I'm hearing Mozart, and even hearing Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen in one of the sections of her song. But really, she's remixing things from so far away that the pattern matching is not obvious anymore. If you put, for example, let's say, with all respects, I'm going to talk about artists. I don't want anybody to think I'm disrespecting anyone. But if you look at the latest record, for example, by Katy Perry, and you look at the last song by Rosalia, it's obvious to me that in one case, the case of Katy Perry, the influences are way closer. So it's way more, let's say, pattern-based. And in the case of Rosalia, the influences are way more distant, so it's more unpredictable, If you don't know much about Rosalia, just to do a quick intro, she's Catalan like me, so she's actually she was born maybe 30 kilometers away from my house, and she actually studied music when she was a student, and there she began with her starting of her career singing basically flamenco, and then flamenco like traditional Spanish music, and then she began remixing flamenco with modern tunes to create her own type of reinterpretation of the traditional flamenco. And then from there she moved to Motomami, which is basically more like Latin reggaeton, futuristic oriented, and now with Berghain, she's going full on lyrical, like this sounds like, again, opera or arias from the 1800s. And by doing this, if you think about it, her career is very chaotic, but she's building an identity. I want to do a parallel between Rosalia and Freddie Mercury. If you look at Queen, the music of Queen went through lots of different eras. The same way, for example, Picasso. Picasso had different eras in his painting, and this happens with many artists, that they go through eras, and each era represents an identity of Rosalia as she evolves as a creator. And it's interesting because if you look at music, I'm going to talk first about music, and then I'm going to talk about other types of products. Because again, I want to talk about AI really. If you look at music in the last 10, 20 years, we've seen disruptive innovation in music. There's a whole background trend of very samey music. And again, please don't take this the wrong way, but 70% of reggaeton music that you hear from Latin America sounds very samey. A lot of what I would call bubblegum pop, which includes, Tate McRae, Sabrina Carpenter, all that kind of stuff sounds extremely samey. It's actually very hard to distinguish one from the other. K-pop sounds extremely samey as well. They're built with the same, let's say, algorithms, if you wish. But at the same time, precisely as an answer to this, we're seeing creators who actually do take risks the same way as Rosalia. So I'm going to recommend some listenings to you in case you don't know them yet. But for example, there's this British band called Sleep Token. If you haven't heard of Sleep Token, just go listen to them. It's kind of like a mixture of heavy metal and progressive music. It's really, really weird in a good way. They're anonymous and they just wear masks. Really, really interesting band that does metal, R&B, and everything in between. If you want to go with something different, go for Baby Metal. Baby Metal is a Japanese kawaii heavy metal band formed by 3 female singers, kind of like kawaii tone, like J-pop, mixed with a backing band of really good heavy metal players. Or back in the day, Rammstein from Germany, they were absolutely disruptive. So what I'm trying to say is that because we have turned content creation into an industry, of course, there's very industrial content, which is kind of like a fast food of constant repetitive content, because that's what sells to a certain type of audience. But at the same time, we're having, disruptive creators in music. But again, let's not talk about music. Let's talk about history, right? I'm a video game designer. That's what I did most of my life, And I remember when the Nintendo Wii came out, that time was called the War of the Consoles. The War of the Consoles between Sony and Microsoft, Sony and Microsoft, they were trying to steal the hearts of the hardcore gamers, and they were just pursuing, better graphics and better CPUs and more memory and, more hardcore visuals. And then out of the blue comes a man called Satoru Iwata. Satoru Iwata was the president of Nintendo, an amazing human being. He died, sadly, but he is the brain master of everything Nintendo has done in the last 2 decades. And he came with the Nintendo Wii. And again, it was disruptive innovation, the same way as Rosalia is disruptive innovation. What Satoru Iwata said is, it's not about fighting for the hardcore gamers. It's about finding a new people who could play with our machines. For example, what would it take for you to be able to play with your grandfather? Well, it takes a different kind of game and it takes a different types of console, and that's where the Nintendo Wii came about. Or, to make more really young children play with the console, right? So that is, instead of fighting for the same audience, it created a new audience, a new demographic, and it revolutionized the way we play. And of course, Nintendo has been doing that since then, then with the Switch and, with the handheld consoles, etc. So I'm guessing you see the pattern. What I'm trying to say is that you can do products, be it music, be it books, be it video game consoles, which follow the rules, or you can break the rules. And then what I'm trying to say, and I will go into more detail later, is that AI is very good at following the rules, but it's not so good at actually disrupting the rules. But let me talk about a couple more products so we get more perspective. For example, I'm 51. I remember when I was a kid, the Sony Walkman came along. Remember the Walkmans? Those portable players? Where did the idea for the Walkman come from? Nowhere. It was a disruptive innovation. Nobody thought about, let's do a handheld music player so that you can hear it with headphones on the bus or on the subway. Disruptive innovation, once again. And I'm going to tell you another one. Imagine if Airbnb did not exist. Please, close your eyes. Imagine Airbnb is not there. And now imagine if I tell you, hey, you're going to go sleep in the house of somebody you don't know because he's going to basically give you his house for a few days. You would think that's crazy, right? But then Airbnb did it, and it was disruptive innovation once again. And then, of course, it took the world by storm. And for many people, Airbnb now is actually equal, or if not better, to a hotel. In my case, for example, being 51, I have 2 daughters, and I typically travel with my family. So for me, Airbnb is very convenient because we have a space bigger than a hotel, and also we have a kitchen, and we can actually buy supplies like dinners and breakfast and stuff like that. See? So what I'm trying to say is that whenever we innovate in a real way, whenever we do something disruptive, initially it's always going to make us feel uncomfortable. Okay? Please try to bring your mind to the second you saw for the first time an ad for the Nintendo Wii, and the people doing, playing bowling or tennis or whatever. I'm sure you thought that looks goofy, right? The same way, the first time you heard about Airbnb, most likely you felt, really? Am I going to go to the house of a guy? You see, innovation always gets us kind of off guard. We're not prepared, and so typically we react with, reluctancy. But then once we're sold on the innovation, because it's good innovation, we're actually absolutely sold, and it becomes unforgettable to us. We will never forget the Nintendo Wii. We'll never forget Airbnb. Or after we heard Rosalia for the first time, most likely the first time you were like, what? And now you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. You see what I'm trying to say? And that's very, very common with disruptive innovation. Initially, it may be ridiculed, but then it's imitated. Let me give you another example. Remember the Dyson vacuum cleaner, right? James Dyson from the UK, he invented the backless vacuum cleaner. And most likely the first time you saw a Dyson vacuum cleaner, you thought, really? Am I going to spend, I don't know how much money on this thing when there's much cheaper vacuum cleaners out there? But Dyson was there saying, no, trust me. Go above your initial reluctancy and try this because it's a much better solution. The same way Rosalia is telling us, hey, listen to my music even though it sounds weird at the first listen because this is amazing, right? And later we found out that James Dyson actually had done over 5,000 prototypes of the new vacuum cleaner before releasing it. So he was very sure that this innovation was actually good. The same way Rosalia in a recent interview said, I spend all my days in the studio because that's how I come up with ideas. You see, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bridge different types of creativity so that we understand that the DNA of real creativity is always the same, which is that creativity is a spark in the dark. And this is a very important sentence, okay? It's a spark, it's something, it's a light in the dark, okay? Creativity is not taking your last record and doing another one literally the same way. It's not taking your last book and doing something that looks like a rehash of your last book or any of these things. No, creativity is actually coming up with something that people go like, wow, this is new. My mouth is wide open. And then after a few listens or a few reads, you go like, whoa, I never expected this. And this is amazing. You see? Let me give you more examples from my field, video games. What did Minecraft copy? Nothing. It came out of the blue. What did The Sims copy? Nothing. It came out of the blue. What did GTA, the original GTA, okay, from the many years ago, GTA 1 from DMA Design in the UK. What did GTA copy? Nothing. You see the pattern. The pattern I'm trying to say is that by definition, creativity is born in kind of like in a void, and it just generates something new in that void. Of course, there's reference. Of course, GTA does have references, for example, in the shape of the movies from the 60s. And of course, Minecraft has previous references. Sure, they do. And of course, The Sims has reference in the shape of, me playing mom and dad with, doll houses. Sure. But the references are so obscure and they're so distant that when real creativity arises, it feels like a breath of fresh air. It doesn't feel like, again, as I was saying, the latest record by Katy Perry, or it doesn't feel like the latest novel, which is kind of like exactly the same one as 100,000 novels written before. There's a philosopher from last century, from 20th century, called Thomas Kuhn. Thomas Kuhn, he wrote a very influential book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. This is a very dense book. Okay, so I only recommend it to you if you guys are into philosophy, because this is really thick. Okay, you need to wear your thinking hat to actually understand this book. It's an amazing book. I read it many, many years ago. And then what Thomas Kuhn actually says is that humanity does not advance in a progressive way, but it advances in a disruptive way. That basically it's not true that we evolve, and through this we grow. It's more that every few years, in every field, in every area, there's a disruption. And that disruption is what he calls a paradigm shift, And a paradigm shift, what it does is actually reinvents the rules. For example, we were in Newtonian mechanics, and then Einstein comes and says, no, here's the theory of relativity. And it breaks the rules completely. We were using acoustic instruments, and then comes the synth. And with the synth, everything we knew goes away, and we invent new rules. We were using home computers, and then the internet comes and changes everything. You see? And typically when there's a paradigm shift, it's very rapid and it's global. If you're my age, you've seen a few paradigm shifts. I'm going to talk just about one. Remember the arrival of cell phones. Nobody had a cell phone, and then in 6 months, everybody had a cell phone. And I don't mean an iPhone, I mean before that, the Nokias and the Ericssons, when we began having cell phones, it was a paradigm shift. We suddenly discovered, oh, are you telling me that I can talk with my friends while I'm on the move in the street? That's amazing, I want one of this. So the idea is that creators, and that's Rosalia in my example here, they don't extend the map. No, they throw away the map and they create a new map. That's what I'm trying to say. They chart uncharted territory. That's what they do. And now I want to move to the second part of this video, in which I want to compare that to AI, because I think Rosalia and AI on the same year is a really interesting thought. Think about this. AI does not create. It computes. That's what I was trying to say before, which is AI takes 1 billion previous ideas, and then it generates one that we request based on that 1 billion previous ideas. So AI explores a space of what's likely. In other words, if the AI knows all this, and I ask a question, the AI is going to give me the most likely answer. Most likely Danny wants this. Okay? But what it will never do is dream of what's possible. And notice how it changed the word from likely, probable, to possible, to kind of like daydream of something completely different. For example, again, as I said, if you take many TV shows now on streaming platforms and you feed those into an AI, most likely, sure, it will tell you, yeah, this is a new show, and yeah, sure, it's kind of like samey, Will that generate Shogun or Black Mirror? I doubt so, because those things are a spark in the dark. The idea of, oh yeah, let's do a TV show for the whole world that's actually, recorded in Japanese, and it's about traditional Japanese history. But then you do it and it does work. You see? Or Black Mirror, let's do a dystopian TV show about the future of humanity, really grim and really dark. And by the way, each episode is unrelated to the other episodes. Again, it's a really weird idea, but that's exactly what creativity is all about, And that's what Rosalia has done 3 times in a row. She did it on the first record with, flamenco-inspired influences, and now then with Motomami, which is more urban, and now with the latest record. She's not following a formula. She's not following a pattern. She's an anomaly. And creativity is an anomaly. So in a world where AI tells us, oh, there's a pattern to creativity, here comes Rosalia and says, sure, invent this. And that's the cool part, And the thought I want to focus now is this idea that maybe, of course, Rosalia is not the problem, and maybe AI is not even the problem. Maybe the problem is us as consumers. Let me put it this way. In the last 30 to 40 years, what has happened to movies? Well, I think 18, I think I looked at this, 18 out of the biggest 20 movies ever are franchises. So we consume the same stuff. How about books? Oh yeah, we all read sagas, once we get hooked on a saga, be it, Game of Thrones, be it Harry Potter, be it whatever. Oh yeah, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. What happens with Marvel? Oh yeah, sure, more stories of the same. What I'm trying to say is that because the creative industries have become a very profitable industry, basically the executives and the companies, they produce more of the same. Let me give you another example. How many pop princesses do we need? The pop princess, right? This was, Britney Spears, and then we had Mariah Carey, actually before, and then we had Christina Aguilera, and now we have Sabrina Carpenter, and now we have Tate McRae, and now we have whatever. How many do we need? It's exactly the same product. You see what I'm trying to say? And the same thing happens again with books. I wrote a novel last year. I wish I could share it with you guys, but it's actually only in Spanish. Yet I hope I get a US publisher soon. Hope if you're a publisher, contact me. So I wrote a novel last year, and when I wrote it, everybody said, "Hey, Danny, this is super weird." Yeah, and it was super weird because it's a novel where an AI actually is born, and it's a child, and this AI believes that he's actually Jesus reincarnate. My publisher were like, "What? This is now so innovative." And I was like, "No, it's not. It's just me being creative." And again, I'm not going to put myself in the same level as Rosalia, not by any means, of course not. But they said, "Why don't you write a police novel? Because those are the ones that sell, kind of like a mystery thriller." And I was like, "Because that's not me. I don't want to write the same stuff that everybody else is writing. I want to write my own stuff." You see what I'm trying to say? What I'm trying to say is we have been acting like machines for the last 3 or 4 decades in terms of our content production, with some exceptions, like, again, as I said before, Baby Metal and, many others who tried to break new ground, and Rosalia in this example. So the creative industries have been so dominated by basically profit-generating franchises that sure, we have substituted that with an AI, because honestly, an AI looks at the last 3 records by Katy Perry and says, sure, I can do it better. Here's another record by Katy Perry. And the AI looks at the last 100 novels, which are sci-fi hero journey type novels, and say, hey, here's another one, because I can churn out the same stuff you do. Because you know what? You guys, and that's what should make us think, you guys are not as creative as you think. Rosalia is creative. The guy who invented the Wii is creative. But a lot of us, we have just sold our souls to the machine, and the machine being the profit generation machine of actually doing samey content. And of course, in that era, what happens is that basically, yeah, sure, AI comes and says, you know what, your patterns are so obvious that I can do the same stuff you're doing. So I think that's really the cool part about this, which is Rosalia is a mirror in this example, a mirror actually showing us that is creativity and you are not. Because most of the stuff we're doing is not creative enough. It could be done by an AI, but actually when you go and see Rosalia, you go like, an AI would never come up with that out of the blue. No way. See what I'm trying to say? What I'm trying to say is it's interesting because Rosalia, in the same way as the AI, in the same year as the AI, it's kind of like a dialogue, The AI says, I can do everything you can. And now comes Rosalia and says, sure, can you? And that's really a beautiful thought, right? But here's the scary part. The scary part, and I want to move to the last part of this video, is that if you think about it, on Monday, now I'm recording this on a Friday, okay? So on Monday, actually, AI will have the new song by Rosalia and it will begin chewing it. And so most likely by the end of next week, we can have a copycat of Rosalia, because again, we can be disruptive, but we're playing catch-22, because actually the AI is going to be fed that disruptive content and incorporated into its database. And now the AI is going to be able to copy the latest innovation, in this case by Rosalia. So that's scary, because really, if you think about it, Rosalia, I'm sure she has thought really hard about this new song, Bergain. But now she's actually feeding the machine so that the machine can actually copy her again. Now, so it's scary, because in one side, we admire her for her courage and her brilliance and her creativity. But now the AI says, sure, I can do it now because you've shown me how. I was not able to do this a week ago because I'm not as creative as you are, but now I will be able. But the beauty of this, if you think about it, and I want to have an optimistic takeaway from this thought, is that doesn't matter if the AI copies Rosalia, because she was there first. Let me explain what I mean. If you're kind of like older like me, sure, you remember the Beatles, right? The Beatles, they created a genre, right? You know, the typical pop group, 4 members, drummer, bass player, guitarist, singer, and the looks and all that kind of stuff. How many copycat bands were after the Beatles, copying the Beatles? Hundreds. How many Beatles are there? 1. How many people try to copy the style of, let's say, Led Zeppelin? Many. But how many Led Zeppelin are there? Once. You see what I'm trying to say? What I'm trying to say is, sure, AI will catch up with any innovation we do, but we will lead. And that's the beautiful concept about this. I have in my Spanish channel, I've spoken about this many times, about this idea of us feeding the AI, and so the AI playing catch up with the creators. But I think the optimistic way of looking at this is, sure, but that's going to paint a post-AI world, which is going to be a world in which first, all the derivative content is going to lose value. Let's face it, those of us who are being creative but not enough in terms of our creativity, we're going to lose a lot of respect, because people are going to say, yeah, sure, that's not so good because an AI could do this. But then the true creators, the disruptors, the Rosalias, the Beethovens, the Einsteins, the Satoru Iwata inventing the Wii, those are going to be enthroned in the category that they deserve as the true geniuses. And I want to say the word genius with all the letters. I do think Rosalia is a female genius, and I'm not saying this as an admirer, but just as a way to describe her features. She is able, and not only once, but 3 times, she has been able to go where nobody was going with her music. And by doing so, make us feel first uncomfortable and then make us fall in love with her new creation. That's the beauty of the true creativity. And I think in the AI world, creativity will always stand out, because again, it's going to lead the way. It's going to lead the way. And then, because AI will follow, it's going to create this phenomenon, which is a very interesting phenomenon of actually putting the creators first, because we will always, now in the post-AI world, we will always be able to trace back to the origins. Again, whenever you see something, you're going to go like, yeah, sure, that's Rosalia. Yeah, sure, ChatGPT did it, or, whatever engine of AI did it, but that's copying Rosalia. Oh, that's copying, Minecraft, or that's copying whatever. You see, the true originals, the true disruptors, they're going to get the respect they do deserve. So in a world drowned in sameness, the few who disrupt are going to become beacons. And that's a thought I've done in other videos, again, in my Spanish channel, which is this idea that I've always, I'm what you consider a techno-optimist. A techno-optimist is the type of person who believes technology always makes the world a better place. Even nuclear energy, yeah, sure, it has dangers, but it helped us create, new forms of energy, for example, So I do believe technology is the driving force of human progress. And if you think about AI, one of the things I've said is, to me, AI is going to have an impact similar to the Industrial Revolution, because it changes our relationship with the machines. In the Industrial Revolution, we learned that we're not the strongest, right? When the Industrial Revolution came out, before the Industrial Revolution, you needed human force, to craft things. And then the Industrial Revolution comes and our force is no longer needed because we have machines, and those machines are much faster than we are. Then with AI, what happens is that we're automating thought. And that's scary, but I want you to think about the world before and after the Industrial Revolution. Thanks to the Industrial Revolution, we were able to manufacture goods and services that were not dreamed before, such as, mass manufacture vehicles and medicines and clothing. And as a testament of that, the human population multiplied by a factor of 4 in the 100 years after the Industrial Revolution. So I think AI is going to have the same impact. Of course, now we don't see it because we cannot see the future. We don't have a crystal ball, but we're already seeing some hints of that post-AI future. And then one of the industries that more concerned about AI is actually the creative industries, right? But I think what Rosalia is telling us with this video is that if you're a true creator, you have nothing to worry about. Nothing, because you'll always lead the way with your vision, be it music, be it design, be it film, be it whatever, But of course, if you're a samey creator, if you're doing more of the same, if your creativity is just a pattern, most likely, you're going to be in deep trouble because, again, there's going to be a moment in which the merit of your work is going to be put in doubt because an AI is going to be able to do it faster and better than you are. So again, I think this has been a very, very interesting week because, again, we see all the advances in the field of AI and OpenAI and yada, yada, yada. And then Rosalia is reminding us that sure, AI is amazing and it can do amazing things and it can mass produce content, but what it will never do is substitute the genius of a human mind. So this was my video today. Again, this was a reaction to the Rosalia video, which actually caught me by surprise, and I watched it and I was like, oh my God, this is so, so, so good. And this is Decode, I'm Danny. For 20 years, I have been a university professor. I have been a game designer. I have been basically a consultant for many, many, many companies. I've written novels and, other types of books as well. And this is my YouTube channel where I try to talk about the modern world in a casual way. So my goal with this channel would be that we start every video willing to learn something, and by the end of the video we end the video thinking, oh, you know what, that was an interesting idea, that made me think, that in a casual way, because I want this channel to be very casual, but I love to all collectively think about the modern world and how it affects our lives. In this case, Rosalia. The channel is growing really, really quickly. This channel is actually born from my Spanish channel, which has about 140,000 followers, and this is my English-speaking channel because I actually work abroad mostly. I live between Barcelona, Miami, and India currently because of projects I'm doing in those countries. And again, at this point, the only thing I'm trying to do is to be useful. My main driving force, I'm 51. Honestly, I've done projects all my life and made enough money already. So what I'm trying to do is to actually build a space that feels useful for the community. And in this case, you guys are the community. And so if you press like to this video, that helps me a lot because it helps me see the kind of content you guys are enjoying more, the kind of content it's maybe less interesting for the community. If you like the video, of course, please do hit subscribe. At this point, we're trying to grow. We're, I think, around 3,000 already. My dream would be to reach 10,000 by the end of this year. So if you watch this video, think about this. Just go into my channel. There's about 10 more videos that you can watch. I think they're all interesting. And you know what? I'm going to be putting, here's my promise to you, right? I'm going to be putting a new video every Tuesday and every Friday for the foreseeable future. So if you subscribe, you're going to get notified every time I put out a new video. And again, I try to keep my videos interesting, such as this one, if you think this one was interesting. And of course, here below, there's the comment section. We're still learning how to do comments here in the English section, but please do comment on this video. What did you think about Rosalia? Is this kind of like your cup of tea, or maybe it's just something that doesn't impress you so much? What other projects or products have you seen recently that made you think, whoa, this is really disruptive, this is really innovative, and what is the comparison of that kind of innovation and the AI that you're experiencing on your day-to-day basis? I would love to have that conversation with you guys. And again, if you subscribe to Decode, we all help this project keep growing, because this is also a disruptive project if you think about it. Here's a 51-year-old guy. Of course, I'm not kind of like a gamer. I'm not a cool guy playing, Fortnite and stuff like that. Here we talk about philosophy, psychology, sociology, and the state of the world. And you know what? There's a lot of people who are seeming to enjoy this content, and I hope you are one of them. So thanks for being here, thanks for watching Decode, and see you on my next video.